Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge. Our special guest today is Ambassador Salman Bashir, former Foreign Secretary. He was also our ambassador in Denmark and China, and our High Commissioner in New Delhi. And Mr. Salman Bashir has also served as Director General Political Affairs at the OIC Secretariat, Jeddah. Sir, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge. You have always been readily available for us, and we are truly grateful to you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the US-Iran talks, which are scheduled to be held in Islamabad, was in fact the culmination of Pakistan's diplomatic efforts and made possible by China's decisive backing. And the two sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire, a 2-week ceasefire last Tuesday, and that resulted in the end of the hostilities. But this truce or ceasefire is conditional and fragile. Iranian side to the talks includes Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Speaker Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf. US delegation includes Vice President J.D. Vance. It also includes Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Now, this is the highest level of US-Iran meeting since the 1979 revolution. Pakistan's role in bringing about the two warring sides to the negotiating table has been crucial, and it has been acknowledged by the international community, barring aside Israel and India. Pakistan has not acted out of abstraction. It's an important stakeholder. It realizes that any instability in Iran, or for that matter in Gulf, would spill into its own territory and threatens internal stability of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the real pressure points still are the Strait of Hormuz, where the shipping traffic has not resumed, and Lebanon, where in Israel's relentless bombing, killing innocent citizens, destroying civilian infrastructure. In fact, it's Mr. Netanyahu's favorite strategy to use overwhelming force to suppress the resistance. Now, the question is not whether diplomacy in Islamabad has succeeded, but whether it can hold. Now, this is the question which I will ask to my guest. The co-host for today's program is Ambassador Riaz Bukhari. Sir, coming to you. Do you think this diplomacy will hold?
No, absolutely. I think it should hold. There is every reason to be positive and optimistic about the situation. I think that since both delegations are going to arrive shortly, and the talks are supposed to take place tomorrow, I think we should be hopeful that they will be result-oriented.
So, do you think there is do you believe in the durability of this ceasefire, particularly keeping in with the fact that the positions of the two sides are way apart, and there is no mechanism in place to ensure that this ceasefire holds?
I think, well, you talk of the mechanism. I'm sure there would be a back channel, or there may be several back channels that are at play, like Pakistan's mediation role will, of course, there's a lot of work that would have gone into it. I mean, in terms of aligning positions of Iranians and the US. So I'm sure there would be some sort of mechanism in place. And that makes me all the more, it gives me comfort to say that I'm very hopeful that this will lead to some results. Because if the US was not inclined to stop its bombing of Iran, then they would not have opted for this. So there are real constraints on the Americans. One can go into that. I mean, there are domestic constraints and international constraints. Among the international constraints, it's evident that none of the countries of the world has supported the U.S. position. In fact, it's quite obvious that even NATO members have sort of refused to go along the full hog with the U.S. So I think there are the midterm elections in the U.S., etc., and there is definitely a highly polarized opinion within the U.S. on this issue. So I think it was President Trump who wanted, as they say, an off-ramp to get out of this, which he thought would be a short, decisive war. But the fact that the Iranians have been able to hold on and they withstood steadfastly the attacks, and there were numerous attacks on Iran. So I think for them, survival was the issue. And Iran is very much there. The regime is still very much there. Of course, their leadership was decapitated. But before that, they had made it sure that there will be continuity in all departments, including the IRGC. So I think that's where we are. We have to look at it from the point of view that the Americans want to quit the bombing, etc. So now on the issues of the maximalist positions, the 15 and the 10 points, those are maximalist positions. And I think essentially what one of course is the ceasefire. Now, at the very minimum, what, if nothing else, they would probably agree to extend the ceasefire. Number two, I think the Iranians under no circumstances will be inclined to give up the control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Correct.
I think that is the key as far as Iran is concerned. And the second key point is the lifting of sanctions.
Excellent.
So, and as far as the enrichment thing is concerned, I think as far as their right to enrichment is on board, then they should be it should be okay. But as far as the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, 60%, that has disappeared. I think that is according to Trump.
So before I pass it on to Riaz, there's one thing I wanted to clarify with you. You said that there's a lot of back channel diplomacy going. Of course it is going. Now, but still there are discrepancies in the interpretation of the point of view of Pakistan, of US, of Israel, of Iran. So this discrepancy which we see, is it because that there is no there's no mechanism to ensure that this thing continues? One thing. Second thing, now the two sides will be sitting together. Do you think that the first step should be to build on the confidence, trust? It's lacking.
Well, of course, yes. The confidence, without confidence and trust, you can't get very far. Whether there will be a face-to-face meeting or proximity talks, I'm not very clear on that. I mean, the previous Omanis mediated, those were proximity talks. Exactly. But now with the Vice President of the US being here, and so I don't know. I have an answer to that. As far as the mechanism or the interpretation is concerned,
particularly in Lebanon.
On Lebanon, now of course, the Prime Minister of Pakistan's tweet mentioned Lebanon very clearly. So now maybe there has been a rethinking in the U.S. because I understand that President Trump spoke to Netanyahu just before announcing. And maybe Netanyahu sees some advantage of, gaining some ground in Lebanon. And that's why he's intensified actions against Lebanon. But I don't think the issue of Lebanon should become the central point at this point in time. Of course, for the Iranians, it's critical, crucial. And if it is to be seen that this is a US-Iran thing and Israel is not participating, then there is nothing to stop the Iranians from continue to bomb Israel, for that matter.
Yes.
Thank you. Sir, both sides, US and Iran, they have presented their maximal positions containing in their, points, 10 points or 15 points. Iranian delegation will be there in Islamabad soon. And they will base their discussion obviously on their 10 points proposal. How they are going to bridge the gaps existing between 15 points of the United States and their 10 points. And then how effectively can this position provide President Trump with a safe diplomatic exit from this crisis?
No, that depends on the competence on both sides of the Iranian and the competence of the American team. But essentially, I think those were maximalist points, 15 and 10 points. As I said, to my mind, what is crucial from the Iranian viewpoint is to keep their hold on the Strait of Hormuz. So that may be a critical point for the Iranians, because without that, they lose a lot, because their advantage is that they have the control of the Hormuz, and we have read or seen them saying that they would like to charge a tariff on the flow of traffic. So that is one thing, and I think President Trump at some point in time said that maybe they could share the tariff.
Exactly.
So I think the Americans may be agreeable to that. It cannot be like it was before, say on the 27th of February. The second most important point is for the Iranians to ensure that the sanctions are lifted. Already some relief has been provided on the export of Iranian oil. And so I think the Americans would be obliged to sort of consider this thing seriously. And as far as the nuclear thing is, as I said earlier, is so far as their right to enrichment is upheld in some manner, it may be okay for the Iranians. And I think they have made it quite clear that they don't want to get a nuclear weapon at this point in time.
During these talks, how do you think the external regional actors, that is the Gulf states, do you think they are influencing the terms or dynamics of these talks in any way?
The Gulf states, not that I have read anything, except that the Saudis, Pakistanis have been in close contact with the Saudi Arabia. And as you remember, the Saudi foreign minister visited Islamabad when Turkey and Egyptian foreign ministers came here. So I think there is good coordination between the Pakistanis and the Saudis. But as far as the other Gulf countries are concerned, I have not seen anything.
The Saudi foreign minister and the Iranian foreign minister had a telephone conversation.
That's right.
And yes. In which they, of course, they talked about the situation, but they also talked about the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, GCC countries are not favorable to the fact that Iran will continue to have influence, or it could use the Strait of Hormuz as a leverage, because Iran could, of course, then blackmail also these states. So what position are the GCC states taking as far as Strait of Hormuz or Iranian influence on Strait of Hormuz is concerned?
Well, yes, there is a point that if the Iranians have the control of those straits of Hormuz, then of course the GCC, most of them will be dependent on the Iranian largesse. But the fact is that the talks are between the Iranians and the US, and US position on this is going to be important. To my mind, the Iranians will insist on keeping control over the straits. And It's another thing whether they charge anything or not. But I mean, even without this, the fact is that they've been able to effectively demonstrate their control of the straits.
So Bahrain tried to bring a resolution,
which didn't pass.
Which didn't pass because of China and Russia, but it was supported by the US. So and it was supported by all of the GCC countries. So for GCC countries, it is very important that the status quo should not be maintained, or the status quo which was before the war, 28th of February, it should be restored.
Restored, yeah, that's
right. Do you
right.
think it can be restored?
Not now. Not now. I think there is going to be a huge difference in the post-28th February situation and between the pre-28th February situation.
But then, sir, peace cannot return to the region because the GCC countries would be constantly under pressure, under fear, and this could again lead to some sort of a conflict, regional conflict then.
Yeah, but I mean, what can the GCC do if the Americans have not been able to do much? Besides the damage that they did to Iran, they have these bases which have become non-functional in these 8 countries or so. And I don't think that the GCC is in any position except to cooperate with the Iranians. And if they cooperate and we get into some, at later stage, into some sort of a cooperative relationship, regulating the flow of oil or the passage of ships, then that's a different thing. But you can't do it as a matter of right or on the basis of demands. I don't think that is correct.
Sir, the temporary ceasefire, once that was agreed upon and announced, it was celebrated in Iran as a victory.
Yeah, that's right.
Has Iran, came out of this crisis as a much stronger party, particularly after the ceasefire? And how can the outcome of, these talks affect the regional security, particularly the regional states, which we were talking about, the new security mechanism, new security structure? How do you see the future of the region, particularly Iran and the GCC countries?
Yeah, about the future, I think only time will tell. But it's quite obvious that Iran has come out on the winning side. Winning side meaning that they were able to take on this double whammy from Israelis and the US. So they have emerged perceptibly as a strong party. And I think this message would be driven home to everybody in the Gulf. So basically, what we are talking here is that, instead of getting into these hostile relationships, if there is a cooperative relationship, then most of these problems can be solved in accordance with the wishes of the GCC and Iran.
And what about GCC vis-a-vis the United States and the 18 bases in the region?
that is now an open question. I mean, whether those GCC countries would like to continue with the existing arrangements, because, I mean, obviously, the hosting of these bases made them targets of the Iranian missiles and drones and whatnot. So there is that aspect. And but I think at this point in time, let's focus on the immediate things, and over a period of time, probably they will decide. Of course, it would appear to me that now, of course, one thing is, I mean, most of these bases are unmanned. I mean, most of their personnel were lodged in the hotels, etc.
Exactly, sir, exactly.
So that is how things are. And I think the GCC countries will reach their own conclusions.
So one of the conclusions could be a role of Pakistan as a net security provider in the region. Do you see that thing happening in the near future?
You mean the Pakistan-Saudi defense thing being replicated?
GCC, Pakistan relations with Iran,
Maybe. I wouldn't rule it out. But Pakistan definitely has acted as a net security provider or stabilizer in the regional sense. And of course, the only key country that is missing out from the region is India. I mean, they have not been seen anywhere near the Iran or the GCC in the recent times. So I think that's a separate...
We will come to that. Iran has won because it has not lost.
Yes.
And US has lost because it has not won.
Yeah.
Well, that. Sir, staying with what Riaz was saying, how do you see the GCC states adjusting their policy towards Iran after these talks if Iran wins concessions from the US? And of course, and as you said, it is not totally beaten, it's not down. So how would the GCC countries adjust their policies towards Iran?
I tell
do you think the animosity or the spice which is there now because of the US or the Iranian attacks on the GCC states, do you think it would be forgotten easily?
Well, the Iranians, as far as I know, they said that they only attacked the American assets in these countries.
Nevertheless, sir.
Yeah, but of course there were those Pakistanis and other nationals that were killed in, for instance, in the UAE. There were these petrochemical refineries which were hit in Saudi Arabia. And of course, all that is very sad and very, very much regretted. And I think the GCC will have to evolve its thinking towards Iran. Iran cannot be be treated as a country which is a pariah. Things were quite okay. I mean, between the rapprochement brought in facilitated by the Chinese between Iran and Saudi Arabia was a big thing. And similarly, I think, but now, essentially in terms of power politics, one can say that Israel and Iran stand out as the two major military powers. And so the GCC could either, in a stark sense, be either with the Israelis or with the Iranians. Or, so it's an open question. But I think basically with what has happened, it is time for the GCC to evolve and to come into some sort of cooperative relations with Iran.
Sir, but evolve how?
I mean,
they have been bombed, they have been attacked. So what does the world expect of them?
No, I mean, it's not what the world expects of them. It's what they themselves, what options do they have? I think the only sensible option is for all of these countries in the region to have some sort of try to accommodate each other. If the Iranians and the Americans can accommodate, then so can the Saudis and the Iranians and the UAE and other countries.
And Iran is going to stay there. It has been there for 1,000 years. It's going to be there.
It's been there for 5,000 years.
Exactly. So just now, these talks which are taking place, we were discussing this before the start of the program, and you were very optimistic. Now, what if the talks fail? What would be the next diplomatic step?
Well, if the talks fail, then the least that they can do is extend the ceasefire till they succeed. But I don't see the resumption of the American attacks on Iran, because that is not on which, or at least in my understanding, is not on which this whole scenario was built. So I think let's be positive and optimistic for the time being.
So I think that talks are being arranged to show to the rest of the world as a success story.
Yes.
That's why they are meeting.
Yes.
China's role in bringing Iran to the negotiating table. In fact, this fact has been acknowledged by President Trump. What role do you see China to continue in these crises? Can it act as a guarantor of any US-Iran agreement? What mechanism can China use to guarantee compliance?
No, there is no doubt in my mind that the Chinese have played a very important and positive role. Having served in Beijing, I know the Chinese way. I think I understand that. They are now never upfront they don't play as a fast, in the front. They always work from behind. Yeah. So it is without doubt the Chinese that were instrumental in persuading the Iranians to agree to a dialogue with the US or talks with the US. So that is true. But as far as the guarantees, I don't think anybody can guarantee the conduct of another country. So at the most that the Iranians could hope for is to get, if the agreement is finalized, to have this endorsed by the Security Council, and that would be in itself a guarantee of non-attack.
Now, sir, you have also served in New Delhi. Yeah. Now, despite Pakistan's well-acknowledged efforts in bringing about a ceasefire and bringing the two sides to the negotiating table, India's official statement on the ceasefire, they welcomed the ceasefire, but they totally ignored Pakistan. And I'm sure you have seen the clips on the social media, how they are reacting to the fact that Pakistan played an important role and India was not there. Now, don't you think India should have acted gracefully and acknowledged Pakistan's role and offered to contribute the peace as a large country in the region?
Well, you are right. They should have done all this, what you were saying. And there are some people that I have listened to who have said exactly that, there was an interview today of Mr. Suri by the Express Tribune, who said the same thing. But of course, Modi's India is very different from my times in Delhi when I was there. It was Manmohan Singh's India, and it was a completely different atmosphere. But I think the Indian diplomacy has lost out. They have not been able to really understand. I mean, Modi's visit to Israel just 3 days before the attacks, the US attacks and the Israeli attacks, his embracing of Mr. Netanyahu and all that, I think it is time for the Indians to sort of come to their, to have a real look at their policies because, just out of spite for Pakistan, they take positions that actually do them great harm. So I think they have shot themselves in the feet, as far as I can see. That is why they have been saying that Pakistan is a sponsor of terrorism and whatnot, and that it was an official policy. It was India's official policy to have Pakistan isolated. They can't just accept the reality of today. That is, Pakistan is playing host, is actively involved. Pakistan's diplomacy has done wonders. So I think...
So how have the Indians been caught off guard? I mean, they say that Dr. J. Shankar, the External Affairs Minister, is a consummate diplomat. And I still don't understand how they were caught off guard. They were not part, or was it a deliberate thing or a calculated step not to be part of this, of bringing Iran and US together, trying to bridge the gaps between them?
I think they miscalculated. I think given the close relationship they have with the Israelis, and which is also based on the animus towards Pakistan, they have overplayed. And this is overplayed in the Indian policy, because their hostility towards Pakistan appears to be central to their own interests. I mean, despite their other interests, they are just so fixated on Pakistan. And Prime Minister Modi has been instrumental at creating this atmosphere of hostility. Especially last year in May, we saw what happened in the Indian media, and they are sending these official delegations abroad, and all that to sell a point that was not. Nobody bought that. So I think it is time for the Indians to sort of take a step back to see where the diplomacy has failed. Because with Israel as their key partner, they will not get very far. And in the region, of course, in the Middle East, they were the ones who were saying that they have a very active profile. But now all of that is finished. I think with Iran also they had good relations. But exactly. Then when the Americans blew up the boat, the Iranian frigate, which had been there for in India. So I think they have, after the death of Ali Khamenei, it took them 5 days to go and to issue a condolence message.
And that was also done by their Secretary External Affairs Ministry, yeah. Not the Foreign Minister, not the Prime Minister.
That's right, that's right.
Yes?
So what will happen to I2U2?
I2U2.
I2U2.
Yeah.
All of this is quite evident, I think. Well, you see, I go back to my point about China. The Chinese have done remarkably well in understanding the global situation. They have been very, very careful not to get themselves embroiled in any issues where violence is concerned. And their Belt and Road Policy initiative was tremendous. I think the Pakistanis should have utilized this much more than just for, it was a substantive, serious option that was given to us from the very beginning. But somehow I think we have lost out a bit on the CPEC 2. We should have worked harder on CPEC 1 and CPEC 2 to make that economic difference that these projects were supposed to bring. And now, I think that this I2U2 thing is probably, it was never a starter, so it's probably disappearing, yeah.
Okay. So again, sir, about the Indian, position, particularly with regard to the current crisis, some political parties, mainstream political parties, and media, they have been openly criticizing, India's non-involvement in diffusing the situation in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And this issue also came under discussion at their parliament. So do you see, the Indian non-involvement in this crisis as a diplomatic failure on the part of India?
Absolutely, yes. I think the Indians themselves, I mean, I have seen some interviews by Karan Thapar and others where they say that the Indian diplomacy has taken a back seat. They have not been able either to understand the developments. They have, because you see, the Indian have two main issues. One is Pakistan, the other is China. Yeah. And if both China and Pakistan are today doing well, and as the Chinese are doing wonderfully well, then the Indians, they can be members of Quad and whatnot, but I don't think even BRICS, they are supposed to host the BRICS this year, and but this brings them into odd with the other members of BRICS.
Exactly.
They have already cancelled one event regarding climate change, I think, summit, which was to be held in New Delhi.
Yeah.
So, coming back to the current crisis, do you see any attempt by Prime Minister Modi to review, BJP's policy with regard to the GCC countries and Iran?
Well, it is for the Prime Minister of India to determine whether he wants to reevaluate or to continue with his present policy. But I hope that they would have more sense. And they need not only to look at the Gulf countries, but the whole world. I think everybody now is thinking, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Mark Carney, talk of middle powers and, this in its Davos speech. So I think we are at a new stage in international situation where the Americans are fast losing their primacy. It's quite clear that these Abraham Lincoln and Gerald Ford and these aircraft carriers do not matter in today's age of new technologies, drones and missiles and all that. So I think everybody is now reevaluating, and the Indians will probably reevaluate themselves.
Okay, sir, with your final question, with your experience and everything, after this war is over, the day after, what sort of a security architecture do you envisage? I mean, about the US continuous presence in the region, the Israel position, the GCC states, Iran's relationship with the GCC states, Iran's relationship with US, Iran possible relations with Israel. I know it's a huge ask, but I know you can.
I will add one thing more, sir. Future of Abraham Accords.
Abraham Accords, yes.
Well, the future of Abraham Accords is in jeopardy. It's quite clear now. Even those countries that have had these accords, who have signed these accords and have had good relations with Israel, would be obliged to reconsider. As far as the general question about security of this region, as I said, these countries, and I would include Pakistan, need to reach a new level of understanding, to having cooperative relations with each other. Now, we saw the massacres, the genocide that took place in Gaza, and nobody sort of, except for the
Iranians.
Except for the Iranians, but also in the Ummah, the Islamic world, although people were deeply incensed, but there's nothing that the governments did. So I think that is one thing, this disconnect between the government official policies and the aspirations of the people. I've seen some songs on the WhatsApp by Arab from Tunisia and others who are talking about solidarity with Iran. So I think the net gain probably would be for the Iranians, but I think the Iranians, for instance, I mean, if I'll give you another example. What has the OIC done? In this crisis, I've not even seen any statement because of these differences. So it's time for regional countries to evolve to a point where they can think of having cooperative arrangements with each other. And in this, they will have the blessings of the Chinese, of course, and countries like Pakistan.
Yes, anything?
Sir, just if you take 1 minute more.
Indeed.
Board of Peace. What is its future now?
That's a very good question. No, I don't know really. I don't think that the Board of Peace is going
Any further?
Any further, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a nice discussion, an informative discussion, as usual, with Mr. Salman Bashir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Islamabad talks, they represent a crucial diplomatic opening in a conflict that has spiraled unpredictably. The success of these talks depend on the readiness of the two sides to meaningfully and substantially and earnestly engage with each other's red lines and to incorporate into the peace process regional grievances, regional concerns. Particularly the hostilities in Lebanon and the easing shipping flow in the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, for these talks to be meaningful, Iran has to make concessions on its nuclear program, and the US would be required to make some concessions on and address Iranian concerns regarding ease of sanctions and a commitment that Iran would not be attacked again. Pakistan is expected to play a constructive role as a facilitator in these Islamabad talks and to leverage its credibility both with the US and Iran to ensure constructive dialogue and to prevent early breakdowns. While Islamabad, of course, cannot enforce the outcome, it can contribute through its skillful diplomacy and mediation, a key factor in removing misunderstandings between the two sides. Thank you for watching Ambassador's Lounge. Please subscribe to our channel and we'll be back.